Hi, everyone. My name is Andreea Enache. I am the head of global business development and strategy at Blind Squirrel Games and the moderator of today's session, Gaming's Future as the Best Form of Entertainment. And it is my distinct pleasure and honor to welcome our guest, Jon Goldman, an old friend that I met. I think, Jon, we met maybe 15 or so years ago on your boat in Marina del Rey. Why don't we start with that fond memory that I have of our friendship over the years, and then we'll dive into the topic today.
Sure. So, as you remember, I had a big game development company with, developers all over the world. I had 1,000 developers, and I was looking at getting an office in Santa Monica, but it was during one of those bubble periods. And as it turned out, it was a better deal to get a slip in the marina and get a boat. And then I tore everything out of the inside and made it into an office, and I had an assistant in there with me. And, it was a thing. Like, people would show up on the boat and might take it out, go get, have some beers, come back, do the barbecue, whatnot. Now, I can't remember what were you at Sony then? Was that where you were?
Yes, I was at Sony.
Yeah.
And you were at Foundation 9.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow, a lot has changed since then.
I know.
Yeah. What an amazing background. Let's talk a little bit about that. Tell us about yourself. What's happened since Foundation 9? Now, fast forward 15 years later, you're a board partner, right, at Greycroft, and a managing director at Skybound.
So I've got three
things.
hats right now. Yeah, so I'm a partner at Skybound, which is an entertainment company that we're most famous for The Walking Dead. I'm sure lots of people in the games industry know Dan Murray and now Ian Howe, who are part of the team. But we do comic books, film, TV, regular books, board games, action figures, apparel, and I'm probably missing a few things, but we're a pretty multifaceted entertainment company. And then, as you say, I'm a board partner in what we call the core funds at Greycroft. And so companies I'm involved with there are Wondery, which is a big podcast company. So I really look at, entertainment technology. And then the third thing is I run a seed fund in partnership with Greycroft called GC Tracker. And I'm the general partner of that fund. So I run that fund. And I have a young colleague who joined the team named Joe Ewan, who some people may know, but he's a great guy to contact. And then I do early stage investments, principally in video game companies. But in the past, I've invested in VR and esports related companies as well. And some of them have actually done pretty well in spite of the slow uptick in VR. So that's kind of the full background. And after I sold Foundation 9, I got involved in venture, and that's as well as some personal projects. And that's kind of how I got from there to here. And there's a whole other story about how I got involved in Skybound.
Amazing track record, and just an amazing path to look back at. As you know, we're supposed to talk about the future of gaming today, primarily from your perspective and through the lens of your experience over the years. The title of our session is Gaming's Future is the Best Form of Entertainment. Is gaming the best form of entertainment? And if so, why?
Well, we're probably all biased because we're in the games industry, but I think that we've seen right now during this very difficult pandemic that the gaming industry has, really grown. People have time on their hands, and increasingly younger people play games in preference to television, but also there are people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who are part of the gaming generation, and they continue to play as well. So it's a much larger, player base than a lot of people think. But most importantly, gaming offers flexibility in payment. You can pay $0 if you're a free-to-play gamer, and you can still spend $60 or $80 if you're really passionate. So it allows fans to scale their commitment financially to stuff they really love. And what that means is it's a really vibrant industry where we're doing bigger and better things all the time. And the dominant model, for example, in television right now is this all-you-can-eat model where you pay the same price for more and more and more and more. And so I know this is going to be broadcast later, but today, as we record this, Netflix surpassed Disney in market value, which is just stunning. And I think they've got at base a very difficult model to sustain indefinitely when you compare it to the game industry, where you've got all these different ways to make money, support developers, support great careers, and build big businesses.
So, very interesting point, and let's talk a little bit about that. As you know, the video game usage and live streaming have spiked, right? As people have been self-isolating, as in response to the coronavirus pandemic. And in fact, about a month ago, and I'm sure these numbers are changing daily, we've seen a rise in the global viewership that has increased to by 10% on Twitch and about 15% on YouTube gaming. So how do you see the future of gaming changing, right, in response to this COVID-19 pandemic? And how about the business models, right, that you were talking about earlier? We're so flexible with offering various different business models, but obviously we're living in very unprecedented times that may dictate a change in our future.
So I think you actually bring up a really good point. Is 15 years ago, there weren't any ancillary revenues, and that was a huge difference between video gaming and other media. So if you made a TV show, you could sell it to, you could release the show, you could then sell it on reruns to a cable provider, you had, DVD sales, you had all sorts of things. And we didn't have that in the gaming industry. There was just box software, and you put it in a store, GameStop or whatever, and then you had a couple weekends to make your money. Now there's actually spectating on Twitch, as you mentioned, and that lends itself, and to different, there's advertising, there's live events, or at least there was before this pandemic. There's a tip jar, which nobody could imagine in other forms of media, that people would just voluntarily pay. So now we've got all these different ways of making money. And the other thing that's different is that every platform is viable. So back in the day, some platforms would lose. You might, let's say you're a developer and you're only a one-team company and you decide to do a game with 3DO. And if you made that bet and 3DO didn't survive, well, it may be too late for you to get on PlayStation or Xbox, if it was past the first generation of those platforms. Whereas today, almost every platform is viable. And if you do a good game, you can't make a wrong pick. And you can always migrate your game to different platforms, with the exception of like, sort of casual free-to-play games, which you can't, but you can be so successful on that platform by itself if you're, with lots of money to invest in user acquisition and that sort of thing. But anyway, so it is a very different world in probably less than a decade.
So do you see, we're talking about this increase in viewership, increase of time spent playing video games. How do you think this habit, this behavior change translate relative to the business models that we've been successfully employing so far? So, subscription-based or, the free-to-play gaming model. Are we going to be able to sustain these business models, or are we looking at a transition towards something new or something rather old that may be resurfacing now? We're talking earlier in the week, right, about the old advertising model, right, that may make a comeback.
Right. Yeah, so I was going to hit that. I mean, I don't know if it will. Like, at the previous venture capital firm I was involved in, one of my portfolio companies that I inherited was an in-game advertising company. And as somebody from the game industry, I didn't really love in-game advertising. Like, so I resented having to be responsible for this company. I thought it was very distracting to the game. For hyper-casual games, that is the main revenue model. And one thing we were talking about earlier in the week is I'm very concerned about the high unemployment numbers. So the games industry has been counter-cyclical. It's done very well and even grown in downturns because as people, faced recessions, they had more time on their hands and they'd play games. I don't know what happens when you see 5 and 10 million people being put out of, work, and if that may necessitate exploring new approaches to the advertising model. That is historically, in other forms of media, that's historically been the mass market form of monetization. And, people with good paying jobs and, sort of white collar salaries are typically very irritated by advertising. But for the rest of the world, it's their main sort of way to access media. So I don't know if that's going to evolve, but that's something that I will, as an investor, I'll be paying more attention to than I did before, regardless of how I feel about advertising personally. We're just seeing a major shift in the economy, the likes of which we haven't seen before, and probably we'll start to feel the effects more by the time this conference is broadcast and then in the summer months that come ahead. And the video game industry will be buffered from it a little bit. So because people are playing games, they're spending on games, it's very vibrant right now, but we have to make sure and pay attention to, the trends that are affecting consumers and their pocketbook and their ability to access games.
Yeah, it's a great point you made earlier, and it kind of stuck with me because I wasn't thinking about it that way. And I think most of us look at how much time most of us have on our hands these days, and that's how we that's how we think of some of the benefits of the situation we're in right now. But oftentimes we overlook things that are very, very important and will affect everyone in every single industry, such as the increasingly rising unemployment rates and things of that nature. So, well, let's go back a little bit to your background, which I continue to find fascinating. So I'll keep at it. I always thought that, especially in the past few years, that you find yourself at this incredibly prolific intersection of content creation, IP, and funding. So just by virtue of wearing so many different hats, how did you make the transition into the VC world? Which job do you find more fun, more challenging, and then to let's spend a little bit of time on your job as a VC, because that's the most recent, I think, hat that you've been wearing. I think it's interesting for people to hear more about that, and then.
So, I mean, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but who sort of got me into venture capital stuff was Yair Landau, who you probably know from Sony, right?
You certainly do. Yes.
So
amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Yair invited me over to Israel to meet a firm called Jerusalem Venture Partners, which is a very successful firm, not only there, but in Europe as well. And so I met a bunch of folks. I thought I was just gonna, maybe snag some easy board seats and, some sort of stipend. But in the way that things happen in Israel, like they had a different plan and sort of pulled me in. And then the next thing I knew, I was working with an Israeli venture firm from Los Angeles and looking at a lot of different companies and helping different portfolio companies there. And so that's how I first got involved. And then along the way, I became friends with either the first or one of the earliest investors in Machinima. He was at a small firm then. And I was a guy that people would reach out to diligence companies. So
was that Philippe Debevoise or his brother?
Well, yeah. So that was Alan Debevoise' company. So, but the investor friend was looking at investing in that, and then he eventually ended up at Greycroft, and we worked on some stuff together around Scopely. And then I got to meet the other folks at Greycroft, and they invited me to spend more time, and then. And then we built this separate gaming fund together. And meanwhile, I was, busy sort of getting re-involved with Skybound, which was from an old relationship, like an old friend that I'd invested in when I was at Foundation 9. So in both cases, I haven't been terribly strategic. It's just, you know, friendships and people I've known for a long time. And then you have no idea where they're going to end up. And one of the fun things about, being older now is that you can just ride along with the young folks. They're coming up with stuff, and I can get involved, and I don't have to sweat the details in the same way that I did at Foundation On.
Well, given your background in dev and content creation and your current roles, right, as part of the VC community, do you think you're more empathetic and objective when you're evaluating opportunities, having been on the other side of the table?
Yeah, so I definitely think I'm often nicer in talking to entrepreneurs, because I know how hard it is to make stuff and do creative work. And, I suppose everybody has a grumpy meeting, but in general, I try and be, supportive and warm, even if I can't get involved, because the reality is you say no most of the time. Like, you only say yes a few of the times. So you're often letting people down. And then, but on the flip side, venture is very, very different than pursuing a publishing deal. And so I've seen from the other, I sit around investment committee at Greycroft and look at all the companies we do. It's fintech and health tech and e-commerce and a bunch of stuff. And there really are some patterns in CEOs that you can see, and who are successful CEOs. And so that's a really hard thing to find sometimes in the game industry, is somebody who both has a vision for the product, but can also really focus on scaling a company, because that's really important in venture is do you believe this team can not only make a good game? Like, if I'm a publisher, I just need to make money on the game. If you're a venture investor, you need the company to scale and really grow in valuation. So they're slightly different skill sets, and it's hard to find together all the time.
So would you say that as a VC, you'd invest in people more so than ideas, more so than creativity?
Certainly at the seed stage where I invest. So at later stages, like even the A, B, and C round, you have facts. There's data. So like, investors really look at facts. You can't. It's hard to have a discussion of, well, the facts aren't so great, but this game is really awesome because we're going to really connect with the Super Smash Brothers community or whatever it is. And to give you an example of where it's difficult for traditional VCs, like a typical, A round in a VC. So you've done a seed round, you've done some work, let's say, and by the time you go for your first, official round, the A round, we're looking for people who are doing about 100K of recurring revenue, not service revenue, not like a one-time deal. And what's challenging is that you might burn through, in the games industry, you may need to burn through your seed, your A, your B, who knows what, before you're actually making real money. So you have to have other signs of traction or risk mitigation that make it of interest to sort of a broader group of VCs. Otherwise, you really can only talk to the much smaller group of investors who focus on games, or, you can augment it with, publishing deals or, platform deals with support from Epic or elsewhere. But, being able to sort of make progress with each round of funding, as opposed to saying, hey, I've done some more stuff. I've got more backgrounds and I've got, look at this explosion or whatnot. Those are that's the difference between pitching a publisher and pitching an investor.
So just to bring this back to today's situation and circumstances, what would you advise entrepreneurs and developers to focus on when approaching VCs, and what do you think the future holds for them? We know that this pandemic has, as resilient as an industry as we are, right? It has affected us, no doubt, right? With so many conference cancellations, and which were really the conduit to small independent developers securing face time with people such as yourselves, right? So what's in the store for them? What would you advise them to do, to focus on, and how would you recommend that they continue to move forward?
So for the seed stage, team formation and hypothesis are the most important things. And I'll look at almost everything that crosses my desk. It's, you really need a warm introduction. Like, you don't want to just send something cold. But when I talk about team formation and hypothesis, almost all of us are looking for a seasoned team, not newbies, doing something they've done before with a slight twist. So, it's unannounced, but I just committed to a real-time strategy company, and the team had led a very famous real-time strategy game. They're bringing some of their, other team members together, so they're people who've worked well together. So, for example, one thing I almost always pass on is, hey, we're bringing the band together. We've got a whole group of people. They don't know each other, but they come from Zynga and Facebook and this and that. It all sounds great on paper. If they haven't worked with each other, like, that's like a quick pass for me. Yes, it's all about risk mitigation. Like, you think that VCs are like, gunslingers in general. Like, it's risky enough starting a company. You want to take as much risk out of it as possible. And so the hypothesis should play into their experience as people in the games industry and their experience as players. Like, it typically is some version of, I've always played real-time strategy games. I love them. This is what has annoyed me forever. I can't believe nobody's ever done this. It drives me crazy, and I'm going to fix this. And because of this fix, the game is going to be more accessible. It's going to make more money. It's going to, like, whatever it is. And that, that hypothesis will fit their experience base, and their team will fit this genre and whatnot. And so, for example, we're a console team and we really think we can apply our skills to free to play games. It's like, that's not for me, because free to play is really hard. And, there are a bunch of skills that they don't have or don't know that they don't have. So there are a bunch of things that, I'll look at. And because actually what people don't realize is the skill set in venture is figuring out how to say no quickly. You don't want to string people along. You can't make an unlimited amount of investment. So you're always looking to triage and figure out, is there any reason to say no to this? And it's brutal to say, because when I was on the other side, that would drive me nuts. But everything really has to be pretty right pretty quickly. And so it's important as a team that's looking for money to have enough self-knowledge and whatnot to know if they don't have a perfect picture, it makes it really hard. And it is just a matter of, thinking through stuff and recruiting really great people that you've worked with before. There is money out there, but it's not for experimentation. It's really for, okay, this sounds really solid, and I understand how they're going to go to market and mitigate as many risks as possible. Is that too much blather?
No. It's great. And I was going to say that it's really great advice, even for other VCs, right, in the business, because a quick no is more helpful to developers, to studios, to entrepreneurs than a prolonged maybe that eventually turns into a no 9 months later. It's not helping anyone.
In any creative endeavor, like, yes is the best answer. A quick no is second best. Like, okay. And you have to be careful with, investors who aren't really familiar with games. Like, you can find somebody who seems somewhat interested, or maybe they're the young associate at a firm who likes games personally, but the firm has never invested in games. You don't want to be the team that they use to smarten up on the field, or, you're their, like, diligence experiment. Like, when somebody's interested, they lean in, and they typically lean in pretty quickly. And if that's not happening, we talked about this, the other day, is your job as an entrepreneur is to move on. It's not to combat all their objections and prove that you're the smartest person in the room. You are looking for people who share your hypothesis and enthusiasm for your thing. And the quicker you move on from the naysayers and the quibblers, the better.
Agreed. Good point. I think we're running out of time. We may have time for a very quick question, a very quick answer, and then for some closing remarks. I wanted to touch on the topic of Hollywood and games, which in my opinion have had this everlasting love-hate relationship in the sense that, you know, we've always dreamt of the perfect movie turning into the perfect game, you know, the best game turning into the best movie, and somehow we've been failing at executing that vision. Do you think that, again, to bring this to today's circumstances, there's an opportunity for games to step in and for the gaming industry to step in and maybe make that dream happen with Hollywood?
I think it'd be much more successful if it started with the game industry. I think traditionally Hollywood has looked at games as licensing opportunities or just as business opportunities, and they've cranked stuff out that's generally not great. The challenge with games is IP has typically been that games are mechanics driven first. And so, you know, as much story as there might be, it's hard to develop all the story and character and whatnot out of it. So I think that really doing deep story development, but with the game company, and then perhaps distributing on platforms like Twitch or Epic or Steam or, you know, Xbox or PlayStation, like those native platforms where the gamers already are, will be a fruitful thing to explore. And then, of course, Epic has been doing an amazing job in promoting their tools as a creation engine for movies. And then one final point, if we're running out of time, is that with the pandemic, it shut down all live filming. And so everybody's on the hunt for things that could be made in CG, whether animation or something that feels more like live action. And I think that's a huge opportunity for the game industry to make stuff in game engines that could be output to, you know, linear media.
I like that we're ending our chat on a positive note. And I would say that if we were to learn anything from these incredibly unprecedented times, I would say that we should learn that the future is now, right? We keep thinking about the future. What are we going to do tomorrow? What are we going to do the day after tomorrow? What will our industry look like 5 years from now, 6 months from now, 3 months from now? Got to focus on the now.
Well, and, the world has changed pretty quickly, and we either need to, you know, adapt to that. I think the other thing we've learned is that entertainment and recreation are really essential to people. They're not optional. It's one of the things that make people happy and in their life, and we should figure out how to respond to that. People love games, and we should do right by them by making great games for them.
100%. Well, thank you, Jon. Thanks, everyone, for joining us and for allowing me to indulge in my fun background. If you noticed it, it's the new original IP coming out of Blind Squirrel Games, and I'm very proud of it. So I'm plugging it a little selfless promotion here, but we're very excited about it. Very excited, Jon, to have reconnected with you and talked about the now, the yesterday, and the future. Amazing.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea.
Stay
really
safe
appreciate it.
and healthy.
Yep. Thanks. You too. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye.